Welcome to Endgame Finance. Today, guys, we want to talk about inflation. Inflation has been very sticky, and a lot of people are just sort of forgetting where this inflation came from and why the Federal Reserve is not very optimistic on the economy in regards to inflation. Federal Reserve signals fresh rate raise this year and fewer cuts in 2024. Basically, the market was expecting a lot more cuts coming into the future. They were expecting inflation to subside fairly quickly. However, that's not really happening right now. Prices are still rising. Federal Reserve officials on Wednesday signaled support for another rate raise this year and fewer cuts in 2024, even as the U.S. Central Bank held its benchmark interest rate steady at a 22-year high. This is the reason the markets have been selling off lately. Basically, markets were expecting more rate cuts, which translates into a lot more free money basically for everyone to pump into in their investments. However, Federal Reserve really put the brakes on this. Federal Reserve is very concerned about rising food costs and housing costs. These prices have been skyrocketing in the last few years, and people are finding themselves unable to buy basic necessities and unable to provide for their own housing. How many posts and articles lately have you read where people are just shocked at the sticker price of just basic goods, of just food, of chips, of bread, of meats, of poultry? Basically, everything has been insane, and there's no signs of slowing down. This is why Federal Reserve is very pessimistic, why they're not really saying they're going to cut rates anytime soon. I believe they're planning to hold rates steady until at least 2026. Now, when people talk about inflation, all they're saying is there's so much money in the economy, there's too much money in the economy. This is why we have this huge inflation, and there is a lot of money in the economy. Federal Reserve and the United States government, which is really who's behind these moves, basically pumped in trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy. And nobody's really questioning, where did this money go? Well, let's take a look at where this money went. $755 billion was just forgiven through PPP loans. Basically, the government gave out loans to themselves and their buddies, and they just forgave it. $755 billion in loans was just forgiven. If you guys want to reduce inflation, let's claw back some of this money. If the company is not making any profit, let them keep the money. If the company's revenues and net profit is under $1 million, let them keep the loan. However, let's force everyone else to pay back these loans. And I will bet you inflation will go down at least 1% point, if not even 2. Even more shocking, probably around 30 to 50% of this money was just outright stolen through fraud, and they're still not doing anything about it. Guys, if we forgive these loans to everyone that's not making a profit or that's made less than $1 million, 95% or even more of these loans will still have to be paid back. If we retroactively force everyone to pay these back, I will bet you spending will go down and inflation will go down. Next, the government basically just gave handouts to other localized governments. We see here $350 billion in emergency funding to eligible states. All of this money basically went to states that were not meeting their budgetary needs. None of this, or at least majority of this money, was not for emergencies. These states and local governments just basically used it to prop up their budgets because so much money was mismanaged through these local governments that they were in huge deficits, and they just took this money to basically balance their budget. Next, we have these capital projects funds that gave $10 billion to states. Who is monitoring where all this cash went? You guys are wondering where inflation is coming from, where it's right here. Homeowners assistance, rental assistance programs, $20 billion. And most of this probably did go to good use. However, you can still read stories of millionaires living in their rented condos not paying rent just because of these laws and this money. CARES Act still gave $150 billion just to state and local governments like it was candy money. These guys said no accountability. They really didn't even check if people needed this money. They were just giving money to everyone. Pandemic unemployment programs. Look at this. This is over $500 billion giving people money just not to work, incentivizing people not to work. If we add this up. Basically, $2 to $3 trillion was just given away. If people really needed this money to survive, we would not have such extreme inflation. There would not be such huge prices in luxury goods, in luxury automobiles, in luxury homes. Basically, if people needed that money desperately, they would have needed to pay the monthly bill, to pay their electric bills, to pay their rent, to pay their schooling bills. But this is not where this money went. This money went to boats, houses, partying, investing. And this is what really crushed the system. And this is why really there's almost zero confidence anymore in economic management of our government. This is why we see cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin emerging, because government is so inefficient and so corrupt. Look at these paycheck protection programs. They forgave almost $800 billion to people that are in the middle upper or upper class. This was basically a handout. This was a giveaway to their buddies and themselves. Many Congress people basically got these loans and then they voted to forgive those loans they gave to themselves. This is insanity. This is why the deficit is over $30 trillion because we have no accountability from any party. Regardless what each party is preaching, each party is so inefficient in managing this country, it's laughable. Most policymakers now project the Fed funds rate will hover 5 to 5.25% by the end of 2024. Everybody's seeing now that inflation is not coming down. These trillions of dollars that were just basically giveaways are really, they crushed the economy. They ended us. If the Federal Reserve actually kept the rates at 0 or 2%, we would be facing the end of times, basically. We would have inflation at 10, 15, 20%, while wages would still remain somewhat stagnant. Basically, millions and millions of people would just be forced into poverty overnight. This is what the government did. This is what happened over the last few years. They forced people into poverty. And when they saw millions more on the way towards poverty, they were like, oh, crap, we have to do something else. We have to raise these rates. Otherwise, we're going to have a total implosion of our country. Basically, the government came close to the verge of destroying the whole country with just handouts, with pure greed, inefficiency, and stupidity. And this is the reason why we have inflation today. This is why things are out of control. This is why prices of used cars are double or triple what they were just a few years ago. This is why we have shrinkflation, why food items are becoming smaller while the prices are staying the same or going up. This is the reason government really screwed people over during the last few years. They were completely inefficient. So that's it, guys. I just really wanted to give you a real talk on inflation. No one really talks about where this money went and who authorized this money to go this way. And it was the government. They basically screwed us all over. This is why we see the emergence of cryptocurrency. This is why Bitcoin has a huge role to play in the future, just because people have lost faith in the government. They lost faith in the government in 2008 financial crisis, where they basically bailed out people who destroyed the economy. And they lost faith in the last few years when the government just destroyed the country in order to serve the interests of very few. So that's it, guys. If you have any questions or comments, let me know below. Guys, like, subscribe, and as always, have a great day.